We rode in cars with no seatbelts, played with mercury, and gave children DDT just to dust their hair. If you think today's world is complicated, wait until you remember the everyday life of the 1960. Welcome to a time when freedom meant zero regulation and shocking risks were just Tuesday. Welcome back to We Are Baby Boomers, the channel built on real nostalgia. We're taking a trip down the most unregulated decade in American history. The swinging, dangerous, and utterly unforgettable 1960. An era where common sense was the only safety policy, and where many things we did without a second thought are now serious crimes. From harmful products to shocking social norms. This is the history that shaped our generation. Get ready to remember the things that were normal then, but would land you in serious trouble today. Before we dive into this incredible list, make sure you smash that like button to support the channel, and subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss our next time travel adventure. Trust us, you'll want to see number 1. Let's start the countdown. 50 things that are illegal now, but were normal in the 1960s. Buying pharmaceuticals over the counter without doctor approval. Back in the 60s, a surprising number of medications, even some powerful antibiotics or diet pills, could be purchased with a friendly nod from the pharmacist, or sometimes no questions asked. The pharmacy culture was highly personal, but deeply unregulated. Prescription requirements were often lax, and pharmacists, as trusted community figures, frequently dispensed remedies based on a simple conversation about symptoms without the strict need for a written doctor's order. This informal system made access to medicine incredibly fast, but it carried an enormous risk of drug interaction and misuse. This casual distribution of potent drugs is unthinkable today. The rise of drug abuse, a deeper understanding of drug interactions, and the formalization of medical practice have led to today's rigorous system. Now, almost every potent medication is a strictly controlled substance, requiring multiple doctor visits, precise dosing, and detailed patient monitoring. What was once a quick stop at the drugstore for a minor ailment is now a highly restricted process designed to prevent abuse and ensure public safety. This shift from trust-based local healthcare to highly regulated modern pharmacy standards defines the difference between the two eras. 49. Selling DDT. Laced products as a common pest control. DDT. That three-letter chemical was everywhere. Farmers used it on their crops in massive quantities, and homeowners sprayed it liberally to control mosquitoes in their backyards, believing it was the ultimate answer to all pest problems. Even more shocking, DDT-laced wallpaper or dusts were sold right off the shelf as a magic solution for household pests. People trusted the science being presented, and the chemical was integrated into daily life to a shocking degree. It was even sometimes used on pets or in a child's hair to combat lice. The belief in DDT's safety was so absolute that its application was widespread and casual, completely ignoring any potential long-term harm. This widespread usage meant the chemical permeated not just the soil, but the entire food chain. The long-term ecological and human health devastation, which was later detailed and brought to public attention by Rachel Carson's groundbreaking book, Silent Spring, was completely unknown to the public at the time. The sale and use of DDT is now heavily restricted or outright banned in the U.S. due to its catastrophic environmental legacy, particularly its devastating effect on bird populations and its bioaccumulation in human tissues. What was once hailed as a chemical miracle is now a symbol of environmental ignorance and a tightly controlled substance under federal law. 48. The unregulated use of X-ray shoe fitters in retail stores. You read that right. In the 1960s, visiting a shoe store, especially with a young child, often meant stepping onto a fluoroscope machine, an unregulated X-ray device to see if your new shoes fit. These devices were nicknamed petoscopes and were placed openly in shoe departments. Kids loved the novelty of watching the bones of their feet glow green on the screen while their parents and the salesperson looked on. This convenience, however, came with a terrifying price: constant, repeated exposure to high doses of radiation. The risks were ignored or dismissed because the radiation was viewed as a harmless novelty. Experts later discovered that the dose received by a child's delicate, developing feet and the salesperson's repeated exposure throughout the day was dangerously high, significantly increasing the risk of cancers and bone damage. Due to the obvious health dangers and excessive radiation risk, these devices were swiftly banned by federal and state governments across the U.S. In the mid to late 60s, becoming a terrifying example of how normalized public radiation exposure once was. The casual use of such powerful diagnostic tools by untrained retail workers is now legally considered a reckless act of public endangerment. 47. Riding in the back of pickup trucks on major highways. For many baby boomers, especially those who grew up in rural or suburban areas, piling into the bed of a pickup truck for a drive was a routine chore or weekend pleasure. Whether it was going to a baseball game, hauling equipment, or just enjoying a summer breeze, this practice was completely normalized. There were absolutely no laws against it. Kids, dogs, and groceries bounced freely back there, often at high speeds and even on major interstate highways. The sheer danger of this practice, however, is staggering when viewed through a modern safety lens. The lack of any restraint system meant that anyone riding in the truck bed was instantly vulnerable to ejection in a sudden stop, a minor fender bender, or a sharp turn. The truck bed turned into a deadly sling, catapulting passengers onto the hard road surface. This practice is now strictly prohibited or heavily restricted in almost every state. Laws require passengers to be seated within the cab and properly restrained. What was once a symbol of casual, carefree American life is now considered vehicular endangerment, reflecting the enormous cultural shift towards prioritizing occupant safety on the roads. 46. Using public drinking fountains without segregation laws being fully enforced. The 1960s were a decade of monumental social and legal change, yet remnants of Jim Crow laws, including segregated public facilities like drinking fountains and restrooms, lingered well into the early part of the decade, particularly in the South. The sight of separate white and colored signs above public amenities was a shocking, normalized aspect of daily life for a generation. This systemic, state-sanctioned racism was fought by the Civil Rights Movement. While the Civil Rights Act of 1964 made this practice federally illegal and enforceable, it took years of struggle, compliance checks, and legal battles for every state and municipality to fully integrate and eliminate these segregated spaces. The simple act of accessing a public service was a daily battleground for dignity and equality. Today, any form of state-sanctioned racial segregation is a constitutional violation, strictly illegal under federal law. The casual, normalized practice of maintaining segregated public facilities, which marked a shameful era of American history, is now considered an offense against civil rights and a constant reminder of how far the nation has come in prioritizing equal access for all citizens. 45. Child labor in agricultural sectors without strict hour limits. The Fair Labor Standards Act had technically been around since 1938, but if you grew up in the 60s, you know that child labor was still a very real and completely normal part of life, especially on farms and in family businesses. Children weren't just running lemonade stands, they were actively involved in physically demanding work, often for long, grueling hours during the summer, particularly in the vast agricultural regions of the country. In the eyes of many families, it was seen as building character and responsibility, a true part of the American upbringing, often superseding formal education during peak harvest times. The shocking part today is the lack of regulation and oversight for that labor. We're talking about children routinely operating dangerous farm machinery like tractors or threshers, handling potent pesticides and toxic chemicals, or working in extremely hazardous conditions with minimal, if any, safety equipment. The laws that existed were loophole-ridden. often exempting agricultural and family enterprises entirely under the guise of farm work. This put countless children at high risk of injury, long-term health issues, and even death. Today, federal and state laws are far more rigorous. While there are still specific exceptions for minors working for their parents or performing certain light agricultural tasks, the hours are tightly controlled, and strict prohibitions are in place against children operating hazardous, high-powered equipment. What was once seen as a wholesome work ethic is now legally classified as a significant labor violation, where the government steps in to prioritize a child's education and physical safety over premature, dangerous work demands. 44. Unregulated sale of firearms at roadside stands or by mail order. The 1,960 were a world away from today's gun control debates. Back then, purchasing a firearm was an incredibly simple, casual transaction that spoke to a different perception of personal liberty. Buying a rifle or a shotgun was often as simple as ordering it from a catalog like Sears or Montgomery Ward, checking a box in a magazine ad, or picking one up at a weekend roadside stall or gun show. There were virtually no federal regulations on who could buy a gun, where they could buy it, or any mandatory waiting periods. The notion of a federal background check was essentially unheard of in most common purchasing scenarios. The weapon would literally arrive at your door or your local post office, ready for pickup with no questions asked about your criminal history, mental health status, or age. This casual, anonymous commerce meant that firearms easily fell into the hands of individuals who would be strictly prohibited from purchasing them today, including known criminals and sometimes even minors. The landscape changed drastically following a series of high-profile assassinations and rising violent crime rates across the nation. This urgency culminated in the passage of the Gun Control Act of 1968. This landmark legislation established the licensing requirement for dealers, began regulating interstate gun sales, and most importantly, put an immediate end to the casual mail-order trade of firearms. Today, the practice of acquiring a weapon without an official, federally mandated background check is a serious felony, transforming a simple, unregulated purchase of the 60 into a highly scrutinized legal procedure. 43. Running a home daycare with virtually zero safety certifications. In the 1960s, the concept of regulated licensed childcare was still developing and was far from the norm it is today. For many working or busy families, the most common solution for childcare was leaving their children with a neighbor, a trusted aunt, or a family friend who ran an informal daycare, often referred to as a babysitting home, directly from their residence. These operations were built entirely on personal reputation, trust, and community ties, which was lovely, but they lacked almost all the safety measures we consider essential today. There were no mandatory state inspections for crucial issues like fire safety, no requirements for providers to hold basic medical training like CPR or first aid certification, and often no established limits on the number of children one adult could supervise. A caregiver could easily be watching 8 or 10 young children at once. A child could easily be left in an environment with exposed electrical hazards, unsecured backyard pools, or unsupervised access to toxic cleaning chemicals. Today, running a home daycare is a heavily regulated business across the entire United States. It requires mandatory state licensing, intensive background checks on all providers and staff members, rigorous and regular inspections of the premises for safety codes, and strictly enforced ratios of adults to children. What was once a casual, trusting arrangement is now a highly professionalized and legally accountable service, enforced by law to protect the physical and developmental well-being of the youngest members of our generation. 42. Disposal of toxic industrial waste directly into rivers or lakes. When the 1960 began, the environmental movement was only just starting to gain traction, and the concept of federal oversight for pollution was incredibly weak or non-existent. For decades, it was considered a completely normal and cost-effective practice for factories, chemical plants, and even municipal sewage systems to dump their toxic industrial waste directly into the nearest river, lake, or stream. These bodies of water were seen merely as convenient, natural conveyance systems to carry the waste somewhere else. The visual evidence was often shocking. Rivers would literally change color based on what the local mill was dumping that day, and local ecosystems were collapsing under the chemical load. The most famous example is the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland, which caught fire multiple times due to the immense oil and chemical pollution floating on its surface. The normalization of this practice ended with increasing public outcry, the rise of powerful environmental activists, and major legislative action. Today, thanks to laws like the Clean Water Act, this practice is strictly illegal. Companies face massive fines, civil lawsuits, and criminal prosecution for contaminating water sources. The idea of freely dumping toxic waste, a normal business cost in the '60s, is now a profound environmental crime. 41. Children playing with unregulated, heavy metal toys containing lead. Take a moment and picture the toy chest from the 1960. It was filled with bright, durable, and sadly, often toxic toys. Lead wasn't just in the paint of old houses. It was a common component in plastics and heavy metals used to manufacture many children's products, especially die-cast cars, metal soldier figurines, and toy jewelry. Durability and a low manufacturing cost were prioritized, with almost no consideration given to material safety. It was a well-known fact that children put everything in their mouths. It's how they explore the world. This meant that the toxic lead paint and lead dust that rubbed off these toys was routinely ingested, leading to cumulative and irreversible lead poisoning. Back then, there was little public awareness of the devastating neurological effects of lead exposure, which include developmental delays, lower IQ, and organ damage. This dangerous normalization ended with stricter consumer protection and public health campaigns. Today, lead content in all children's products is strictly regulated by the Consumer Product Safety Commission, CPSC, making the manufacture or sale of lead-contaminated toys an illegal act that results in massive product recalls and criminal penalties. 40. Casual use of mercury in school science experiments and homes. In the 1960s, mercury, a heavy, silvery liquid metal, was a completely normal fixture in classrooms and homes. It was used in everyday household items like thermometers and silent light switches, and it was a staple in middle school science experiments. Teachers would pour small puddles of mercury onto a desk and let children play with it, rolling the toxic balls around, marveling at the novelty of the liquid metal. At the time, the understanding of mercury's potent neurotoxicity was poor. People did not grasp that the metal vaporized easily at room temperature, releasing odorless, invisible fumes that were inhaled and accumulated in the body, slowly causing severe brain and nerve damage. The danger was completely hidden because it was a novel, accepted learning tool. Today, the casual use of elemental mercury is strictly banned in all schools and is heavily regulated in almost all consumer products. When discovered, mercury contamination in schools or homes requires highly specialized, expensive, and legally mandated cleanup procedures. What was once a fun classroom demonstration is now an emergency hazardous material scenario. 39. Smoking in public hospitals and doctors' waiting rooms. The image is almost surreal today, but it was absolutely commonplace. A doctor lighting a cigarette while delivering a diagnosis, or a patient casually puffing away in the waiting room, often with an ashtray right next to the patient intake form. Smoking in hospitals was completely normal throughout the 1960s, and it was even accepted in labor wards and intensive care units. This normalization was deeply ironic and highlights the slow pace of public health awareness. While the dangers of smoking were starting to emerge, the practice was so entrenched that even the institutions dedicated to health failed to ban it. The air quality in these enclosed spaces was notoriously poor, exposing sick and recovering patients, as well as staff, to heavy concentrations of secondhand smoke. Today, Smoking is strictly illegal in virtually all public buildings across the U.S., but especially within the entire perimeter of a healthcare facility. Hospitals enforce rigorous smoke-free campus policies, making the act of lighting up within hundreds of feet of the entrance a violation of building policy and, often, local ordinances. The old smoky hospital lobby of the '60s is now a relic of a deeply contradictory time. 38. Doctors endorsing specific brands of cigarettes on television. Speaking of doctors and smoking, the 1960 still saw the lingering tail end of a truly bizarre marketing practice that would be a criminal violation of medical ethics and advertising law today. Doctors openly endorsing specific brands of cigarettes on television and in print ads. Brands like Camel, Lucky Strike, and Chesterfield all ran campaigns using physicians or actors dressed as doctors, who often claimed that their brand was less irritating or better for your throat. This was a calculated, devastatingly effective attempt by the tobacco industry to lend credibility and a false sense of safety to a deadly product. Because doctors were seen as the ultimate authorities on health, these endorsements completely misled the public and normalized the habit, creating generations of loyal smokers. This practice ended with the rise of overwhelming scientific evidence linking smoking to cancer and the subsequent crackdown by federal regulators. Today, it is strictly illegal for any tobacco company to engage in health claims, or for any medical professional to endorse a product known to be harmful. The idea of a doctor on TV recommending a particular cigarette is now a shocking ethical and legal nightmare, thankfully relegated to the historical archive of terrible advertisements. 37. The use of asbestos in nearly all new home construction materials. Asbestos was the miracle fiber of the 1960 construction industry. It was fireproof, durable, and an excellent insulator. Consequently, it was put into virtually everything used to build or renovate a home: floor tiles, ceiling panels, pipe insulation, exterior siding, and particularly drywall compounds. If a house was built or remodeled in the '60s, it almost certainly contained large amounts of asbestos. The problem, which was deliberately downplayed or ignored by manufacturers, was that when the material was disturbed through drilling, sanding, or demolition, it released microscopic fibers into the air. These fibers, when inhaled, lodge in the lungs and can lead to devastating, slow-developing diseases like asbestosis, lung cancer, and mesothelioma. What was meant to be a permanent, safe material turned into a lethal, hidden hazard. Today, the use of asbestos in new construction is strictly banned, and its handling and removal in old homes are governed by extremely strict federal and state laws, like those enforced by the EPA. Disturbing asbestos without proper containment, certification, and licensing is a major legal violation. A common remodeling project from the '60s is now a legally mandated, heavily protected abatement project. 36. Flying a commercial plane with unlocked cockpit doors. Air travel in the 1960s was glamorous, simple, and shockingly unsecured. Pilots operated under an entirely different set of rules, and the notion of a locked, armored cockpit door was non-existent. In fact, on many flights, the cockpit door was not only unlocked but often left open during the flight. The flight crew was frequently social, and it was a common thrill for a child or even an adult passenger to be invited up to the cockpit mid-flight to meet the pilot and see the vast array of instruments. The pilots were seen as friendly operators, not security barriers. This practice ended abruptly and permanently following the wave of hijackings that peaked in the late '60s and early '70s, and was cemented by the terrorist attacks of the 11th of September 2001. Today, the cockpit is considered a heavily secured fortress, with armored, locked doors and strict rules prohibiting unauthorized access during the entire flight. Attempting to enter the cockpit without authorization is a serious federal felony, turning a casual passenger thrill of the '60s into a maximum security alert. 35. Buying raw milk from local farms without mandatory pasteurization. Do you remember the taste of fresh, full cream milk poured directly from a glass bottle? In the 1960s, buying raw milk Milk that hadn't been pasteurized was completely normal, especially from a local farm or dairy. It was often sought after for its characteristic creamy texture and rumored golden health benefits, believed to be lost in the pasteurization process. This belief in the superiority of the unprocessed, natural product was very strong. However, behind the appealing facade and the health beliefs, a frightening hidden risk was growing. Concerns about foodborne illnesses began to emerge directly linked to consuming unpasteurized milk. Raw milk can harbor dangerous pathogens like Salmonella, E. coli, and Listeria, which can cause severe infections, particularly in young children and the elderly. The simplicity of farm-to-table was also the path for serious disease outbreaks. Today, federal regulations from the FDA mandate pasteurization for all interstate milk sales, and most individual states have implemented extremely strict regulations or complete bans on the sale of raw milk. While a few states still allow it with tight controls, the widespread sale and consumption of raw milk without warning labels, a 60 staple, is now largely illegal and viewed as a profound public health risk. 34. Selling high radiation uranium ore as a child's science kit. If you want an extreme example of the 1960 cavalier attitude towards science and safety, look no further than the Gilbert U-238 Atomic Energy Lab. While originally released in the 50s, these types of kits and the mindset behind them were still common in the early 60s. These were not just toy chemistry sets. They were fully functional science labs that contained, among other things, actual samples of radioactive uranium ore. The kit's educational goal was to let children trace the path of alpha particles and watch for radiation flashes, but the potential for accidental, long-term exposure to radioactive material was immense. There were minimal warnings, and parents or teachers had little knowledge about proper handling or storage of radioactive materials. Today, the distribution and sale of any radioactive material to the general public, especially to children, is strictly controlled and virtually illegal, without specialized licensing and containment measures enforced by agencies like the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, NRC. A child's educational toy from the 60s is now legally classified as a hazardous material requiring specialized disposal. 33. Minimal government oversight on unsafe baby crib designs. The baby cribs of the 1960 were beautifully designed, but often dangerously constructed. Safety standards were rudimentary or non-existent. A common issue was widely spaced slats in the crib sides. The spacing was often large enough for a baby's head to slip through, but not their body, leading to the devastating risk of suffocation and strangulation. Furthermore, the hardware used to adjust the mattress height or fold the crib was often flimsy, leading to crib collapse or pieces breaking off. The design flaws were a hidden hazard within the home. Because there were no federal safety mandates, manufacturers had no legal incentive to change their designs, and parents had no way of knowing which cribs were truly safe. The industry operated purely on a buyer beware model. This unacceptable danger led to public outcry and eventually the passage of the Consumer Product Safety Act, which led to the creation of the CPSC. Today, the CPSC sets strict, mandatory safety standards for cribs, including maximum slat width and hardware durability. The sale of an old-style 60 crib with wide slats is now illegal, and they are routinely subject to massive recalls due to being deemed structurally unsafe by modern law. 32. Using car batteries to power household appliances or toys. The car battery was seen as a readily available high-power source in the 1960s, and it was not uncommon for people to use old or spare car batteries to power various household projects, large model trains, or other large toys and appliances around the home or backyard. The energy source was a convenient, cheap fix for power needs outside of the standard wall socket. The danger, of course, was the battery itself. The common lead-acid battery contains highly corrosive sulfuric acid, which is extremely dangerous if spilled or if the battery casing is cracked. Furthermore, Charging or using a lead-acid battery improperly releases flammable and explosive hydrogen gas. Handling these powerful, heavy chemical components without proper training or ventilation was a common normalized hazard. Today, the casual use and disposal of lead-acid batteries are highly regulated due to both the chemical hazard and the environmental risk of lead contamination. Improperly storing or handling these batteries in a residential area can lead to code violations and requires specialized recycling and disposal, making the 60 practice of using them as a utility power source a serious violation of environmental and safety codes. 31. The practice of hand, delivering financial documents and cash via unprotected mail. In the 1960s, much of the nation's financial life moved through the physical postal service. It was completely normal to mail sensitive documents like personal checks, credit card applications, and even significant amounts of cash, especially money orders or birthday money, in a standard, unprotected paper envelope. Financial security was based on the trust and reliability of the U.S. Postal Service. As the decade progressed and into the 70s, the rise of identity theft, check fraud, and mail theft made this practice increasingly risky. Sending sensitive, unprotected information through the mail became a primary vector for financial crime. The casual anonymity and lack of protective measures made people incredibly vulnerable. Today, sending cash through the mail is heavily discouraged and is often a violation of major courier service policies. Financial institutions now mandate secure, digital transfer methods and heavily discourage the mailing of checks or personal information, viewing the 60s-style casual mailing of money as a reckless exposure to criminal activity. Federal agencies actively prosecute mail fraud and theft, making the 60 norm of trusting a simple envelope with your financial life a dangerous, antiquated behavior. 30. Driving without a driver's license in many rural or low-traffic areas. In the 1960s, particularly in remote or deeply rural parts of the country, the laws regarding driver's licenses were loosely enforced or simply ignored. It was a common, normalized practice for young teens to drive on local roads, or for older individuals to continue driving without ever having obtained or renewed a formal license. The feeling was that in low-traffic areas, the government had no business dictating who could operate a vehicle. The problem, of course, was the lack of competency and accountability. These unlicensed drivers were often completely untrained in traffic laws or safe driving practices, and if an accident occurred, there was no governmental record or insurance accountability. This posed a significant risk to everyone else on the road, as well as the driver themselves. Today, mandatory licensing is a strict legal requirement in all 50 states. Driving without a valid license, regardless of the area, is a serious moving violation that results in heavy fines, vehicle impoundment, and often jail time. The 60 notion of local exemption from licensing laws has been replaced by universal standards for road safety and accountability. 29. Unrestricted use of amphetamines for weight loss or energy. The 1960 was an era where doctors were often quick to prescribe pep pills, amphetamines, like dexedrine or benzedrine, for a vast array of common complaints, including weight loss, fatigue, or simply to boost the energy levels of housewives or students. These powerful stimulants were viewed as a quick, effective medical tool to manage life's everyday pressures. This widespread, casual medical use led to an inevitable and devastating crisis of addiction and abuse. People became physically dependent on the drugs, and the dangerous side effects, including heart issues, paranoia, and severe psychological dependence, were ignored until the problem became rampant across the country. The normalization of this practice ended with a major federal crackdown. Today, amphetamines are classified as highly controlled Schedule II substances, like Adderall, reserved only for specific, tightly managed medical conditions, such as ADHD or narcolepsy. The practice of prescribing speed simply for weight loss or energy is now strictly illegal and a major violation of medical practice, highlighting the extreme overprescription of the 60. 28. selling tobacco vending machines freely accessible to minors. The convenience of the 1960 extended right into the realm of cigarettes. Tobacco vending machines were ubiquitous. They were located in restaurants, bowling alleys, train stations, and public lobbies. Critically, these machines were almost always freely accessible to anyone with a few coins, and there were no age verification mechanisms whatsoever. This meant that children and teenagers could easily and anonymously purchase cigarettes without having to interact with a clerk or worry about being asked for ID. The widespread availability of these machines normalized the product and accelerated the adoption of smoking among underage individuals. This practice is now strictly illegal in nearly all jurisdictions across the United States. Federal and state laws have either banned tobacco vending machines completely or require them to be placed in areas that are closely supervised and inaccessible to minors, like behind a bar. The casual, anonymous self-service of cigarettes, a 60 fixture, is now a major public health offense subject to heavy fines for the establishment. 27. Lack of mandatory eye protection in industrial and construction sites. If you watch archival footage of construction sites, factories, or workshops from the 1960, one thing is immediately noticeable: the virtual absence of mandatory personal protective equipment, especially eye protection. Welders, carpenters, and factory workers routinely performed tasks that generated sparks, flying debris, or chemical splashes without wearing basic safety glasses or face shields. The prevailing attitude was one of rugged individualism, where safety equipment was seen as cumbersome or unnecessary. The result was a high incidence of preventable, devastating workplace injuries, including eye loss, blindness, and severe corneal damage. These injuries were simply viewed as a normal, accepted cost of doing business. Today, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, regulations mandate the use of appropriate eye and face protection for virtually every task that poses a risk. Failure to enforce these rules results in severe fines and site closures. What was once common practice is now a major legal violation of worker safety and health standards. 26. Consuming diet sodas. Sweetened with the controversial cyclamate. Cyclamate was the artificial sweetener of choice in the 1960s, found in countless diet sodas, sugar-free products, and powdered drink mixes. It was about 30 times sweeter than regular sugar and calorie-free, making it extremely popular during the burgeoning diet and fitness trends of the decade. People consumed it daily, believing they were making a healthier, modern choice. The product's popularity was suddenly halted in 1969 when a major study indicated that extremely high doses of cyclamates could cause bladder tumors in test mice. Although the dosage given to the mice was far higher than human consumption levels, the link to cancer immediately created widespread public panic and fear. In a swift, highly publicized move, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, banned cyclamate in 1970. Although the debate over its carcinogenic properties continues today, it is still allowed in many other countries. The sale of cyclamate-sweetened products remains illegal in the U.S. This event transformed a standard diet staple of the 60s into a forbidden, legally restricted food additive. 25. High school students being exempt from conscription. Draft registration. While the Vietnam War and the draft dominated the lives of many young men in the mid to late 1960s, the specifics of draft registration and eligibility were significantly different from today. The Selective Service System was active, and while the exact procedures were complex, the idea that a young man could easily defer or avoid the process was a common part of the national dialogue, often based on student status or family connections. Today, the law is absolutely clear and universal. Every male, U.S. citizen and immigrant residing in the U.S. between the ages of 18 and 25 is required to register with the Selective Service System. Failure to register is a serious federal felony, and it can result in the denial of federal benefits, student loans, and federal job opportunities. The casual non-compliance and structural deferment loopholes that were a complex reality of the 60 draft system are now replaced by a simple, mandatory, and legally enforced registration requirement for all young men, regardless of student status. 24. Openly selling fireworks with highly unstable explosive formulas. In the 1960s, the 4th of July was a spectacular and extremely dangerous affair at the consumer level. Fireworks were widely available at roadside stands and temporary shops, and the products themselves were often constructed with highly unstable and powerful explosive formulas. You could purchase powerful, uncertified items like M80, cherry bombs, and other powerful firecrackers with minimal restriction. This led to a massive number of preventable injuries, including severe burns, lost fingers, and extensive property damage every year. The products were made cheaply, often without quality control, and the casual handling by children and teens made the entire holiday a high-risk activity zone. Today, the sale and use of powerful, aerial, or non-ground-based fireworks are strictly illegal in most states and municipalities. The products that are legal are heavily regulated for stability and explosive content. The practice of openly selling high-powered, uncertified explosives, a 60-summer tradition, is now strictly illegal and punishable by significant fines and confiscation. 23. Children using sharp, tipped metal darts, jarts, in backyard games. Lawn darts, or jarts, were a hugely popular backyard game in the 1960s, a staple at summer barbecues and neighborhood parties. The rules were simple. Players tossed large, heavy, sharp-tipped metal darts high into the air, aiming for a circular target placed on the lawn. The thrill was the accurate throw and the satisfying thud as the dart pierced the turf. The terrifying truth was that these darts were literally metal spears with weighted, razor-sharp tips. Just one wrong throw, a gust of wind, or a child accidentally walking into the playing area could, and tragically, often did, lead to severe, penetrating injuries, including brain damage and death. This completely preventable danger led to massive public outcry. Today, the sale and use of sharp-tipped metal lawn darts are completely banned in the US by the CPSC. If you find a set today, they are antiques or have been retrofitted with rounded, blunt tips. The dangerous metal spike game of the 60s is now illegal merchandise. 22. Advertising alcohol products to a clearly underage audience. While explicit laws against selling alcohol to minors have always existed, the advertising standards of the 1960 were far more lax and often blurred the lines concerning who the intended audience was. Ads for beer, wine, and spirits were often run during programming and in magazines that had a significant youth following, featuring scenarios and characters that appealed directly to a younger demographic. The subtlety of the message often encouraged the normalization of drinking at an early age and failed to recognize the vulnerability of teenagers to such influential marketing. There was simply no legal framework in place to restrict the content or placement of these ads based on the age of the viewing audience. Today, the advertising of alcohol is heavily regulated, both by law and by strict industry codes designed to prevent targeting minors. Ads must show people who appear to be over the age of 25, cannot use youth-oriented cultural references, and cannot be placed during programming where the majority of the audience is under the legal drinking age. The casual borderline marketing of the 60s is now a major legal violation of responsible advertising practices. 21. Zero noise pollution regulations in urban residential areas. The 1,960 were loud. In major cities and even many suburbs, there were virtually no ordinances or legal restrictions on the level or duration of noise created by construction, factories, loud music, or even neighborhood activities. Loud machinery could operate all night, and industrial noises could permeate residential areas without any legal recourse for the residents. The mindset was that noise was a natural, inevitable byproduct of a bustling, productive economy, and personal discomfort was a secondary concern. This resulted in widespread hearing loss, sleep deprivation, and chronic stress for residents living near industrial zones or busy construction areas. Today, nearly every major city and municipality has strict, legally enforceable noise ordinances that dictate acceptable decibel levels and operating hours, particularly at night. Excessive noise pollution is now a legal violation that results in fines and forced operational changes for businesses and construction companies. The quiet, regulated neighborhood is a direct result of laws against the casual noise creation of the 60s. 20. Unchecked air pollution from factories operating without emission controls. Like water pollution, the air quality in the 1960s was visibly and chemically horrendous in many industrial regions. Factories, power plants, and mills operated with virtually no government-mandated emission controls. Smokestacks routinely belched thick, black, visible plumes of soot, sulfur dioxide, and heavy metals directly into the atmosphere. This unchecked pollution caused major smog events in cities and led to a high incidence of respiratory illnesses, asthma, and chronic lung conditions. The pollution was seen as a necessary indicator of a strong economy, and the health effects were secondary to the profits of industry. The normalization of this toxic output was largely ended by the passage of the Clean Air Act. Today, the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, enforces strict, technologically based emission controls. Operating a factory without legally mandated scrubbers or emission controls is a severe federal violation, turning the once normal sight of thick, black smoke into a sign of environmental crime. 19. The complete absence of required child safety seats in vehicles. The most pervasive safety failure in the 1960 car culture was the complete absence of child restraint laws. While a few rudimentary child car seats were available, they were expensive and often designed more for a child's containment, like a booster seat on the lap, than crash protection. It was completely normal for a child to sit unrestrained in the back seat, stand on the front transmission hump, or even sit on a parent's lap while the car was moving. This practice was incredibly dangerous. In the event of an accident or sudden stop, the child became a projectile inside the vehicle, leading to severe and often fatal injuries. There was no social stigma and no law against this behavior, which today is viewed as absolute negligence. Today, every single state in the U.S. has strict, mandatory child safety seat laws, requiring age and weight-appropriate restraints. A child must be buckled into a federally certified seat, and failure to comply is an immediate, enforceable violation. The idea of a child standing up in a moving car, a 60 memory, is now a major, illegal traffic offense. 18. Minimal regulation on owning highly exotic and dangerous pets. The 1960 saw the casual and largely unregulated exotic pet trade boom. It was entirely possible to walk into a specialized pet store or respond to a classified ad and walk out with a highly unusual or dangerous animal, such as a large python, a monkey, a puma cub, or even a baby alligator, with minimal paperwork or oversight. The immediate concern was public safety. Escaped or improperly cared for exotic animals posed a direct threat to neighbors in the local ecosystem, and the casual owners were often untrained in the specific, dangerous needs of these wild creatures. Today, the ownership of most exotic and dangerous animals is strictly regulated or outright banned across the country. Specialized permits, large-scale enclosures, liability insurance, and veterinary certification are required. Releasing or owning a highly restricted exotic animal without proper documentation, a simple transaction in the 60s, is now a serious legal violation. 17. Doctors performing invasive procedures without explicit informed consent. The legal and ethical standard of informed consent was still in its infancy in the 1960s. It was common practice for doctors to explain medical procedures to patients in only the most rudimentary terms, often withholding information about serious side effects, alternative treatments, or risks. The prevailing medical philosophy was, "Doctor knows best," and patients were simply expected to comply without extensive questioning or understanding. This imbalance of power and lack of transparency led to patients undergoing procedures they didn't fully understand and suffering unexpected harm. The legal doctrine was slow to recognize the patient's absolute right to full disclosure. Today, informed consent is a strict legal and ethical mandate. Doctors must fully disclose the procedure, the risks, the benefits, and all alternatives. Performing an invasive procedure without documented, explicit informed consent is considered medical battery and malpractice, making the opaque, paternalistic medical conversations of the 60 seconds a legal liability. 16. Construction workers not required to wear hard hats on site. Hard hats, high-visibility vests, and steel-toed boots, the standard uniform of today's construction worker, were not universally required or enforced in the 1960s. Like eye protection, the choice to wear a hard hat was often left to the worker, and many chose not to, viewing it as uncomfortable or unnecessary. This casual attitude toward safety on towering, multi-story work sites led to a devastating number of head injuries and fatalities caused by falling tools, debris, or structural collapses. Head injuries were a rampant, preventable tragedy across the industry. Today, under OSHA regulations, the use of hard hats is mandatory on nearly all active construction sites. The site foreman or company can be heavily fined for non-compliance. What was once optional gear is now a legally enforced requirement for personal safety. 15. Free movement of livestock on public roads in non-rural zones. In the 1960s, the boundary between rural and suburban areas was often vague, and in many places, it was not uncommon for farm animals, cows, goats, or horses to casually wander onto public roads, even near towns. Open range laws were still prevalent, and the farmer was often not immediately liable for the movement of their animals. This led to frequent and serious traffic accidents, where a collision with a large animal could be fatal to the driver. The animals posed a significant, unpredictable hazard on roads, where car speeds were steadily increasing. Today, most municipalities and counties have strict leash laws or fencing requirements that prohibit livestock from roaming onto public rights-of-way, particularly in areas with any level of residential density. The free, unchecked movement of large farm animals, a common sight in the 60s, is now a clear violation of traffic safety and local animal control ordinances. 14. Disposal of used motor oil and chemicals into street drains. Before widespread environmental awareness and recycling programs, the disposal of automotive fluids and harsh household chemicals was an extremely casual, unregulated affair. It was completely normal for a DIY mechanic to change their car's oil and then simply pour the used toxic motor oil directly down the street storm drain, believing it would be carried away. This practice meant that highly toxic petroleum products, heavy metals, and chemicals were immediately introduced into the local water table, rivers, and streams, contaminating drinking water sources and destroying local aquatic life. The convenience of disposal completely overshadowed the environmental catastrophe it caused. Today, the disposal of used motor oil and almost all harsh household chemicals is highly regulated and legally mandated to be taken to a certified recycling or hazardous waste collection facility. Pouring these substances into a storm drain or sewer is a clear environmental crime, punishable by severe fines and often criminal charges. 13. Lack of mandatory inspection for used and repaired vehicles. In the 1960s, particularly in states without a rigorous motor vehicle inspection program, there was little to no oversight on the mechanical safety of older, used, or recently repaired vehicles. A car could be driven legally with severely worn tires, faulty brakes, non-functional lights, or a cracked chassis. This posed a massive, systemic safety risk on the roads. Many accidents were directly caused or exacerbated by preventable mechanical failures, and buyers of used cars had no guarantee of the vehicle's roadworthiness. The responsibility was almost entirely on the individual driver, with no government safety net. Today, many states require mandatory periodic safety inspections for registration renewal, and most jurisdictions enforce strict laws about vehicle defects. Selling or driving a vehicle with major, known safety defects, a common reality of the 60s, is now a legal violation that can lead to immediate citation and vehicle impoundment. 12. Sending children to school sick with highly contagious diseases. The understanding of disease vectors and the importance of isolation were different in the 1960s. While some diseases were taken seriously, it was often normalized for parents to send a child to school, even with highly contagious, non-lethal, but widespread illnesses like chickenpox, measles, or severe flu, under the philosophy that exposure builds immunity. This meant that the diseases spread rapidly through schools and communities, leading to large outbreaks, disruption, and an unnecessary risk to vulnerable populations, like pregnant women or the immunocompromised. There were no immediate, legally enforced exclusion policies for many common illnesses. Today, health codes are strictly enforced. Schools must follow mandatory exclusion periods for a vast array of contagious diseases, and health departments actively track outbreaks. Parents who knowingly send a child to school with a serious contagious illness in violation of school policy and health code can face social and legal consequences, making the casual, community exposure model of the 60s illegal. 11. Using certain highly toxic commercial cleaning agents without warning labels. The cleaning products available for sale in the 1960s were often incredibly potent and contained harsh, highly toxic chemicals, such as concentrated lye or powerful acid-based drain cleaners. Crucially, the labeling requirements for these products were minimal or poorly enforced. A consumer might buy a highly dangerous industrial cleaner without adequate warnings about ventilation, skin contact, or lethal ingestion. This led to a high rate of accidental poisoning in homes, particularly involving children, and severe burns or lung damage in adults who used them without proper protection. The convenience of a strong clean came at the risk of permanent physical damage. Today, strict federal laws, enforced by the CPSC and the EPA, mandate clear, prominent hazard warnings, first aid instructions, and child-resistant packaging for all corrosive and toxic household chemicals. The sale of unlabeled or poorly labeled toxic substances, a 60 norm, is now strictly illegal and immediately leads to product recalls. 10. Legal blood alcohol content. Back. Limits being shockingly high. In the early 1960s, the legal limit for blood alcohol content, BAC, in many states was a shocking 0.1% or even higher. For reference, the national standard today is 0.08%. This difference meant that a person could consume several more drinks and still legally operate a vehicle. Drinking and driving, while acknowledged as a risk, was not stigmatized as a serious criminal offense until later in the decade. The acceptance of such a high legal limit contributed directly to a massive number of traffic fatalities and serious injuries. A driver with a BAC of 0.1% is significantly impaired in judgment, reaction time, and coordination, yet they were legally allowed to drive. The powerful shift in social and legal attitudes was spearheaded by organizations like MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Today, the legal limit is 0.08% nationwide, and many states have even stricter laws for commercial drivers. Driving with a BAC over the current limit is a serious crime, DUI divided by DWI, making the legally tolerated level of impairment in the 60s completely illegal today. 9. Lack of public access standards for people with disabilities. The 1960 saw a near-total absence of legally required accessibility standards in public and private construction. Buildings, restrooms, public transportation, and sidewalks were rarely designed with ramps, accessible restrooms, or features to accommodate people using wheelchairs, walkers, or those with visual impairments. This lack of design meant that many public spaces were effectively off-limits to people with disabilities, restricting their access to education, employment, and social life. The built environment was unintentionally, but systemically, discriminatory. The normalization of this exclusion ended with the passage of major civil rights laws, culminating in the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA. Today, the law mandates specific, strict accessibility standards for all public and commercial spaces. Constructing a building that fails to meet ADA requirements, the normal practice of the 60s, is a clear violation of federal civil rights law. 8. Retailers accepting personal checks without required ID verification. Before the widespread adoption of credit cards and digital payment systems, the personal check was the dominant form of payment. In the 1960s, it was very common for retailers to accept a personal check based solely on trust or a handwritten name, with little to no requirement for photo identification. This casual trust made check fraud incredibly easy and widespread. Forgers could write checks on closed accounts or stolen funds with high impunity, as the merchant had no legal requirement to verify the identity of the person presenting the check. The risk of financial loss was simply transferred to the merchant or the bank. Today, strict policies and financial fraud laws require merchants to demand photo ID for almost all non-digital transactions, and banks track check fraud rigorously. The casual, unverified acceptance of a personal check, a staple of 60 retail, is now a dangerous practice that opens the merchant to significant financial losses and legal non-recourse. 7. Children hitchhiking alone on highways and interstates. In the 1960s, the practice of hitchhiking was considered a normal, often romanticized part of youth culture and road travel. Crucially, it was not uncommon for preteen or teenage children to hitchhike alone or in small groups on highways and interstates, either for short local distances or cross-country adventures. The immense danger of this practice, including the risk of abduction, assault, or fatal traffic accidents, was slowly, tragically realized over the course of the decade. The lack of accountability and the vulnerability of the lone traveler made this a high-risk activity that was too often exploited by criminals. Today, most states have specific laws that prohibit or heavily restrict pedestrian traffic on interstates, and many local ordinances prohibit or severely restrict hitchhiking, especially for minors. The idea of letting a child hitchhike alone, a normalized symbol of youthful freedom in the 60s, is now legally considered child endangerment and is viewed as a reckless act of parental or individual negligence. 6. Using coal or wood stoves indoors without modern ventilation requirements. For heating and cooking, particularly in older homes or rural areas, the use of coal or wood-burning stoves was still common in the 1960s. These appliances were often installed with rudimentary or poorly maintained venting systems that did not meet modern standards for carbon monoxide (CO) safety. The poor ventilation and incomplete combustion created a high, hidden risk of carbon monoxide poisoning. CO is an odorless, invisible, and lethal gas that would silently build up in a home, leading to accidental deaths and severe permanent brain damage. The lack of mandatory CO detectors meant the danger was never apparent until it was too late. Today, all new wood or coal-burning appliance installations are governed by strict building and fire codes that mandate proper ventilation, chimney maintenance, and safety clearances. Furthermore, most jurisdictions now require the installation of certified carbon monoxide detectors. Using a stove without proper venting, a common practice in the 60s, is now a major building code violation and a severe criminal negligence risk. 5. Casual handling of consumer fireworks. Today, we attend professional, licensed fireworks shows. But in the 1960s, anyone could walk into a roadside stand and buy powerful fireworks, including things like M80 or cherry bombs, with little to no regulation. These weren't just sparklers. They were powerful explosives readily available to children and teens, often resulting in severe burns, lost digits, and property damage. The casual purchase and use of these explosives, often mixed with an equal casualness toward drinking, created a deadly atmosphere every summer holiday. The normalization of this casual pyrotechnics practice ended as states implemented strict bans or highly regulated their sale. often limiting consumers only to safe and sane non-aerial devices. Today, the purchase of any high-powered or uncertified firework is strictly illegal, and the possession of items like M80 is considered a serious felony related to the possession of an illegal explosive device. The simple purchase of a firecracker has been transformed from a summer ritual into a highly restricted, often illegal, transaction. 4. Airline security that was minimal to non-existent. In the 60s, airport security was a myth. You didn't need a ticket to walk right up to the gate. There were no metal detectors, no X-ray machines for luggage, and certainly no liquid restrictions. You could meet your loved ones right at the plane door, often waving them off from the tarmac. The focus was on customer service and convenience, not security. This era of convenience ended with a massive spike in airplane hijackings that plagued the industry and was fundamentally destroyed by the catastrophic events of the 11th of September 2001. That event led to the creation of the Transportation Security Administration, TSA. Today, the rigorous, intrusive TSA process, including full-body scans, mandatory shoe removal, and strict liquid restrictions, is a daily reality. Attempting to pass through an airport today with a concealed weapon or a sharp object, which was easily doable in the 60s, results in immediate federal detention. The 60 airport experience is impossibly, almost criminally, naive by modern legal standards. 3. The sale of uncertified and unsafe tramp stamps for children. Before strict food and toy safety standards were fully in place, many consumer products were created with dangerous, unregulated chemicals. One shocking example was the common tramp stamp, or temporary tattoo found in cereal boxes, gum packs, or inexpensive vending machines. These were cheap to produce and often contained unregulated dyes, pigments, and adhesives. These uncertified chemicals and dyes were often absorbed through the skin, leading to severe allergic reactions, rashes, or even long-term poisoning when routinely applied. Parents and children had no way of knowing what compounds were being used in the products. Today, the FDA heavily regulates every component in temporary body art, demanding that all ingredients are certified for cosmetic use and safe for human contact. The casual distribution of unknown chemical stickers, a frequent prize in 60 children's snacks, is now a clear violation of federal child product safety laws. 2. Selling leaded gasoline for everyday vehicle use. You could smell it on the highways and you could smell it in your garage. The sweet, distinctive scent of leaded gasoline. Tetraethyl lead was added to fuel to boost engine performance, a practice that was normal for decades and universally accepted. Gas pumps offered only two choices: regular and premium, both containing lead. What people didn't know, or what manufacturers successfully suppressed, was that every tank full was poisoning the air. This toxic emission was directly linked to neurological damage, particularly in children living near busy roadways, causing developmental delays and other long-term health issues. The environmental and health cost of the 60 commute was devastating. The gradual phase-out and eventual ban of leaded gasoline in the U.S., enforced by the EPA, is considered one of the most important public health victories in history. Today, the sale of leaded fuel for non-off-road vehicles is strictly illegal, turning a standard fuel into an illegal environmental hazard. 1. Smoking a cigarette anywhere and everywhere you pleased. This is number one because it was the most pervasive norm of the decade. The 1960 was peak smoking culture. People lit up in elevators, at their office desks, in grocery stores, in movie theaters, on buses, and even in many classrooms and doctors' waiting rooms. Doctors smoked while seeing patients. It was a normal, accepted backdrop to American life. The ashtray was the most common piece of office furniture. The freedom to light up anywhere, a hallmark of the 60s, is now completely gone. Today, smoking is banned in nearly all indoor public spaces, restricted in many outdoor areas and parks, and aggressively taxed and regulated. Violating these bans can result in heavy fines for both the smoker and the establishment. The casual, accepted act of lighting a cigarette in a crowded space is now a public health offense, defining the stark difference between yesterday's shocking risks and today's legally enforced public health standards. It's truly shocking to see how much has changed, isn't it? The 1960 were a wild and free time, but that freedom came at a very high cost in safety and health. For the baby boomers among us, these aren't just history facts, they are memories of a world where risk was simply a part of the everyday. Let us know in the comments, which of these 50 shocking norms do you remember the most vividly? Don't forget to subscribe to We Are Baby Boomers for more trips down memory lane, and share this video with someone who still misses those crazy 60 days. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.